Okay. Hey guys, what is up? It's your girl Jasmine Kylene. I am a spiritual counselor, I'm a journalist, I'm a human being, eating as little dairy as she can, but sometimes she slips up and that's okay. I typically film my astrology updates on IG Live and then I upload them onto YouTube later, but Instagram, babe. She has not been the kindest to me today. I've had a lot of technical difficulties. I tried to upload a reel, I tried to go live, it was not having it. I blame it on the Eclipse. I think Eclipse is like, they have the same notoriety that like Mercury retrogrades do when it comes to like technological shakeups, and I feel like we don't talk about that enough, but like essentially they're full moons on steroids, and I feel like anytime you try to like work against the current, it just becomes so much more difficult. So I've just flowed with it and I'm like, okay, we'll just film this on a camera and maybe it'll work. And if it doesn't, you guys are on your goddamn own. But as you can tell by the title, I am here to tell you about a couple of ways that you can survive this eclipse season that we are embarking on Friday, November 19th. It is kicking off the Taurus-Scorpio axis, and this is an eclipse story that we haven't sort of been told since, I believe it's October 2012 to November 2014. So the very first and foremost thing that I would say is to reflect on the lessons that you learned in that time period and see in what ways do they connect with the lessons that life may be yelling at you right now. Because the thing is, whenever we experience an eclipse season, right, these are very, very, very karmic times. These are karmic cycles. They're stories that are told over the course of 3 years. So like the themes that are going to come up with this Taurus-Scorpio axis are going to they're going to kind of play out until 2023. So you know, there are times of like deep transformation, and anything that you have an attachment to that is kind of like it's obvious that it needs to go and you're not really letting it go, it's going to kind of be forced out in a way. And it's an important experience because it is when we build a home within our comfort zone that we stay stuck and stagnant and we don't meet the more evolved version of ourselves. And it's periods like this, it's eclipse seasons like this that really introduce us to the new versions of ourselves, the more evolved versions of ourselves. And sometimes in order to get out of that comfort zone, we need to be kicked out of it instead of like gently led. So I think like the universe has kind of like been gently leading us out of our comfort zones, and some of us have taken the brave steps in embarking in that path. But for those of us, and maybe, you know, in some ways you've been brave and in some ways you've embarked on that healing journey, in some ways you've stayed sort of in whatever you define comfort to be. And I don't want to demonize the comfort zone, but when the comfort zone starts to act against you and it starts to keep you in a blind state or a safe state to the point where you are not experiencing or in pursuit of your passion, then that's when you kind of need to be forced out of it. And so the eclipse will have a way of removing out of your life what you are probably more reluctant to release. And so I say all that to say that over the course of the next 3 years, especially with it being in the theme of Taurus, we are going to be told a new story when it comes to our relationship with our sense of worth, right? Because Taurus rules the second house, which is our relationship to things, to our experiences, to the things that we own and the way that we live life. It's how we find these things worthy, but it's also, it's a mirror back into how we define ourselves as worthy, our sense of self-worth, and if we're building and living a life that reflects that sense of self-worth. So we're really going to be looking at our relationships, we're going to be looking at our workplace, the environments that we allow ourselves to be in, and wondering and asking ourselves, do these reflect the way that I feel about myself, or the way that I've worked so hard at feeling myself, or the way in which I have grown to feel about myself. I hope I'm making sense. In my head that's a sentence and it's not coming out, but if you have grown, if you have done work, if you have put work into building a deeper and stronger sense of self-worth, then you want to make sure you are really acting accordingly and that you're living a life that reflects that. And Taurus, especially this like full moon, lunar like eclipse in Taurus, is really going to be like, in what ways are you not speaking, honoring, living alongside your sense of self-worth, and how can you begin to take responsibility, assume responsibility, take accountability for that, and change that. So I say all that to say that the questions and the ways in which that's showing up in our life right now are definitely reflective of the way that they showed up in 2012 through 2014, which, mind you, if you're around my age group, then that was probably a time during your adolescence. You know, for me, I'm 25, so like at that time period, I'm not gonna do math, but I was definitely in high school, and I was a completely, just a different version of me. I was a much smaller, much less aware version of me, and I think I needed to be. I think that's, you know, that's how life goes and how time works. But it's funny because these same questions are coming up relative to like my relationships and my sense of self-worth right now are definitely ones that came up in that time period. Is this recording? It is. And now that I'm in such a more evolved state of being, I'm able to look at them and answer them and respond in a much more evolved way, and it's beautiful. Because the thing is, an eclipse is going to ask you, do you want to evolve or repeat? Simple as that. So you really want to look at, what was I learning at that time period? How am I learning it again, and how can I respond in a way that's more intentional this time around? Also, you want to make sure that you look into your chart and see what Taurus rules, to know in what ways or in what areas of your life are you being called to reflect on how you find worth and value in those areas. For example, if Taurus rules your 10th house, you're really going to be looking at career. If it rules you know, your 11th house, you're really going to be looking at your friendships and even like how worthy you find digital presence in social media. Is it something that you're allowing to be a tool to help you grow? Is it something that's stifling your growth because you're so addicted to it? These are really large questions that we're going to be asking ourselves, and it's important because with eclipses, one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that eclipses bring about a lot of endings, but endings are always choice and perspective, and every ending is an opportunity for a beginning. And so whatever story is ending, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a part of your identity, whether it's a part of your career, ultimately I think though what's beautiful is if there's an ending of mindset that's happening right now, and what way can you plant a seed when it comes to the mindset shift that's going to be born from the release of that old way of thinking, or that old habit, or that old like negative self-talk that this eclipse really wants you to surrender. So allow any endings right now to be opportunities for new beginnings. Reflect on what lessons you were learning before and how you can sort of respond to them differently now. Also, I think what an eclipse will always teach us, no matter what axis we had, right? Because the last one was a Gemini Sagittarius story, which was a lot in itself. But right now we're really going to be called to surrender control and to figure out in what ways can we practice surrendering control. This eclipse, you are especially going to feel if you have any major placements or your north and south nodes in fixed signs. So Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, or Scorpio, we're all gonna feel it. You're especially gonna feel it if you're predominantly fixed, which I am, so hi, I have not been sleeping. But however, all of us are really going to be called to reflect on our relationships with control, and how can you surrender attachment to plan? How can you stop investing so much energy into plan and begin to invest that energy back into trust? And knowing that, listen, I don't have to figure out what that is, what I'm walking towards is, but I can continue to choose forward. You can always define what forward is, even if you don't know exactly what it is that you're going to arrive at. And I feel like the universe is really inviting you to rest, to allow yourself to be carried a little bit, to, you know, respond to the call to action when it arises, but otherwise to just allow a little bit, surrender control, allow life to lead a little bit instead of forcing. I think so much of our healing, I think we live in a society that is so productive that we think so much of healing needs to be done and figured out and structured, and sometimes healing comes in the exhale, in the surrender, in allowing what comes up to come up and move through, allowing what goes to go, and not needing to deconstruct it or define it or, you know, take action, but rather to simply allow. So even on like the day of this eclipse, or the beginning of this eclipse, the lunar eclipse on the 19th, I think a lot of people think like, you know, on full moons or new moons we need to manifest or release, and like yes, but when it comes to eclipses, none of that manifesting, none of that releasing. If anything, I would say do the minimal possible. Really just allow rest that day. I'm all about, and if there's any part of your body that repels the idea of resting, really reflect on why it is that you don't see value, or rather see less value in resting rather than being productive, and redefining that for yourself, because eclipses tend to, I think above all else, they tend to mess up our sleep a little bit. So you're gonna wanna make sure that like rest is playing a very large role in your schedule and your routine right now. So honoring that, making sure that that's getting done, but ultimately just like surrendering to the story that plays out on its own rather than forcing its narrative. And while you're doing all that resting, also you want to make sure that you're having a grounding practice to return to as well. Eclipses can tend to be really erratic, unsettling, ungrounded time periods. And so if you have something that you're doing every single day, like some beat to follow when it comes to grounding, that's gonna be super, super helpful. Their name used to be Melanated Mama. I don't know what their Instagram name is anymore. I'll put it somewhere here so you see it, but they recently had a post talking about how their morning and night showers and like the routine that they do, the intentionality with their morning and night routine is like their form of grounding, and it inspired me so deeply to be more intentional with like my morning and night grounding. But yes, coming back to a grounding practice during a time that is so specifically emotionally erratic is going to be important. Also, I think this eclipse is really going to invite you to find beauty in being in an in-between state. When we're in a state of limbo, and like this is something that I'm intentionally working on as well, because I was pulling cards with my beautiful friend Tara, and I kept pulling the limbo card, and that brought me such anxiety, because as someone who is predominantly fixed, right, Aquarius Sun, Leo Moon, I think that like I find so much comfort in like knowing where I'm at, like knowing what's the plan, where I'm at, what I'm doing. And so when I'm in that in-between state, when I'm not who I was before, but I'm not quite who I'm becoming, when things aren't exactly where I'm meant to arrive at, but they're not what they were before, when we're in that in-between transitional state, it can be very uncomfortable, it can be unsettling, and it can be honestly like depressing. And eclipse seasons are very transitional periods in our lives, right? They're the force change that's gonna put you from where you were to where you're going, and where you were to a new evolved state of being. But there's like an evolutionary process that happens. There's a transitional period that happens, and you wanna make sure that you are finding freedom in being in that state of limbo rather than allowing it to be a source of anxiety or feeling like you need to fix it. So find beauty in being in an in-between state. And along those lines, sorry, I'm checking my notes. The last thing I would say is to make sure that you're living as honestly and as less ego-led as possible. The thing is, if you are in any way, shape, or form living out any sort of lie, whether you're lying to yourself or you're playing up a facade online, or if you're playing any kind of role in life, and in any way are you not living at your full authentic truth, that is going to be very, very loud right now. And with Scorpio at play during this little, you know, axis, all truth is going to come to the surface. Eclipses like to conceal before they reveal, so there's like a funny play there, but Scorpio is going to make sure that everything true is revealed. And so it's important that to have the smoothest experience of this eclipse season, you want to make sure that you're living as honestly as possible, that you're speaking up on what you're feeling, that you're sharing honest thoughts and honest feelings, that you're communicative, and that you are just living a life in alignment with truth. So I hope that those served you. I hope that they make sense and that they're things you can come back to. And if there's anything that I would invite you to perhaps journal on, it really would be to reflect on who you were and where you were at in 2012 to 2014, and see what ways does it show up and align with who you are and where you're at now. So I'm sending you all my love. Happy eclipse season. It may be a bit, it's a weird thing to look forward to, but I'm really excited about it because I think change is incredible. Change is the only constant we can expect, and sometimes we need these forced pushes. I think we can build such an attachment to what we know is safe that we don't allow ourselves to branch out and to free fall a bit, and eclipses have a beautiful way of kind of forcing that. So I hope that during your free fall you enjoy the views, and wherever you land is much more beautiful than where you jumped out of. And yeah, I'm sending you all my love. If you want to know where specifically Taurus and Scorpio rule your chart and you want some insight on what that means for you, please feel free to reach out and hit me up. But otherwise, I'm sending you all my love, and I'll see you next time. Bye!